Morning students, welcome back to the class of science. In the previous class of science we just discussing about the properties of matter. Now in properties of matter we are discussing about the two type of properties. One is called physical property, another is called as a chemical property. Also we are discussing about physical property, there is a solid, liquid and gas, as well as in chemical property we are discussing about the compound, mixture and element. Also we have to discussing about how the effects of the solid, liquids and gas and what are their properties. And also we are discussing about in the previous class what are the properties of matter that we are discussing. Also I told you that when we are discussing about solid, liquid, gas, I told you that there is an intermolecular force. Intermolecular force in solid is very strong, in liquid less strong compared to the solid, and there is a no intermolecular space into the gases that we are discussing in the previous class. Now today we are discussing about the intermolecular force. Now what do you mean by intermolecular force? Now the force that exists between the particles of matter of solid, liquid and gas, that is generally called as an intermolecular force. So the force which exists between the particles, we know that each and every matter which have a specific particles, maybe solid have a particles, liquid having a particles, gas is having a particles. So the force that exists between the particles of the solid, liquid and gas, that is generally called as the intermolecular force. Now simple example, when we apply the force to any object, like for example through my hand I apply the force to dash that moving this place. So the force of my particles of muscle. So similarly the force that exists between the particles of matter, it may be in a solid form, liquid or gases, the force which exists the particles, that is generally called as the intermolecular force. Now the force of intermolecular force that arrange in a three different states, like solid state of molecular force, liquid and gases. Now so in the given figure there is a three state of particles are given. One is called as a solid particles, another is called as a liquid particle, another is called as a gaseous particles. So how this type of effect that can be seen into these particles? So first we are discussing about the solid. Now in solid, the given figure, the particles of solid are strongly bonded to each other. The particles which is seen into the solid surface, they are strongly bonded to the each other and which is looking in an organized way. They are having an organized way. So the force is maximum into the solid crystal. The solid substance having a crystals which having the maximum force. So in solid the particles having a specific organized manner, they generally bounded to each other, एक दूसरे के साथ जुड़े हुए रहते हैं, they are very closely bounded to each other and which is generally in a specific organized way, and the force is maximum generally seen into the solid crystal particles. While into the liquid, while seeing into the liquid surface, there is some space between seen into the particles of liquid. So they are not be strongly bonded to each other like a solid. So in particles of liquid, we see that there is a small space, the gap between the particles of liquid that can be seen. So easily they can be flow. Liquid have a specific property to flow. They can be easily moving from one place to another place. Solid cannot. So the particles are not being strongly bounded to each other. There is a small gap of the particles of liquid. For example, when we see the like milk is a form of liquid. When you add some sugar particles in it, the sugar easily can be filled in a milk. So why? Because there is a small gap available into the liquid substance. So whatever the substance you can be added in a form of, they can be easily absorbed by the liquid particles. Because the particles are liquid, not be strongly bounded to each other, there is a small gap between the particles, so it can be easily flow. The intermolecular force is slightly less comparison to the solid because they have not strongly bounded, so their intermolecular force is less, and there is no properly shape like solid have a crystal space shape like, but liquid doesn't have a particular shape. Now gases. Now gas, if you see the particles of gas, they are scattered everywhere. They can be scattered everywhere in every direction. So they are not being properly bounded to each other. So there is this long gap between the particles of gas. So intermolecular force is less. It means there is no intermolecular force available into the gas. So for this movement of the gases, they generally generate the pressure. They moving the everywhere, so generally they generate the pressure. So, as the particles of the gases, which is generally considered as the number of volume of the gas, is comparison to the solid and liquid is very less. So, generally these are the intermolecular force. The force which is extracted between the particles of the solid, liquid and gases, generally they are known as the intermolecular force. Solid have a strong intermolecular force because the particles are bounded very closely to each other. Liquid have a very less intermolecular force because there is a small gap available between the particles, while gases has no any intermolecular force. So, particles are generally moving into the any vessels, there is no any shape and volume of these gaseous substances. Okay. So, now this is about solid, liquid and gas. Now, next topic we are discussing about, if we are providing the effect of pressure and temperature, how it can be changed into the state of matter. If you provide the effect of pressure and temperature onto the state of matter of object, how it can be changed. So, first of all, there are generally we can be see the effects of atmosphere. Atmosphere generally creating the temperature and pressure by applying the so much heat and pressure of air. So, generally the state of matter of solid, liquid and gas generally having a changes when we apply the pressure or maybe increase the temperature on the state of matter. It may be also change the state of matter of solid, liquid or gases. So, when we apply the force or providing the pressure or maybe providing the heat temperature, generally we can see there is a changes into the state of matter. All three of matter there is will be slightly change. So, while there is a minor change if we provide the temperature or pressure. Now, first we are discussing effect of temperature, how that can be change the temperature, then we can discussing about the pressure or maybe. So, generally when we provide the heat, generally temperature is rise up. For example, if you are moving into the some out place and there is so much heat, the temperature of body also be increased. So, when we provide the heat to any object, generally we can compare the solid substance. When we provide the heat of the solid, they is slightly heated. It means the particles is slightly converted into the kinetic energy. Why it should be kinetic energy? When we start to provide the heat to any object or particles, it is slightly converted into the kinetic energy because it should be heated and moving, slight to move from one place to another place. Okay. So, it should be converted into the kinetic energy. So, composite particles that can be increased into the solid form and that start to be vibrated. When we provide the heat to the solid substance, so slightly there is a temperature is increased into the solid substance. So, there is a particles which converted as a part of the kinetic energy and slightly it can be start to be vibrating होना start होते हैं. So, the vibrating when the particles of solid that start to be vibrate, it means it start to be move from one place to another place, start to be move. So, on that scenario, this type of the particles require the more space because it start to be moving from one place to another place while that start to be heated, they generally require the more space to be expanded. So, solid surface that can be expanded when we provide the heat. For example, iron, when we provide the heat to the iron surface slightly that can be expanded because why? The particles of iron into solid surface that converted is a part of kinetic energy and start to be vibrating, and after the vibration it start to be moving from one place to another place. So, that is why the solid surface that can be expanded. So, that strong vibration that generally overcomes to the force of any object which has a specific fixed position and generally point to be a small particles. तो एक specific point से that can be moving from another process, so that start to be converted and a break from a specific point and convert into the liquid substance. So, when you provide the heat to the solid substance, the particles that can be expanded, heated and that can be break down into the smaller particles and converted into the liquid. So, when we provide the temperature increase, solid that converted into the liquid form. Similarly, when we provide the heat to the liquid substance, okay. So, liquid substance when we provide the particles that can be converted in a form of vapor continuously, if you provide the heat to the liquid substance, the more and more kinetic energy that can be acquired by the liquid substance and that converted in the form of gases. So, when temperature increases, liquid converted into the form of gas. So, that is generally called as a translation. This process is called as a translation process, okay. So, translation process is what? when we provide the heat or increase the temperature to the solid substance, this is converted into the liquid. Also you can provide the temperature to the liquid substance, this is gas converted into the gas, that is called translation process, changes its shape from one form to another form. Similarly, when we decrease the temperature, gas is converted into the liquid and liquid converted into the form of solid. So that is the vice versa process, that is generally called as a physical change. Now next topic we are discussing about the latent heat of fusion. Okay. Now what do we mean by latent heat of fusion? Fusion is generally a part of heat, energy. So if a solid substance is start to be heated, अगर किसी भी solid substance को आप heat करना start करते हैं, generally its temperature is rises. उसका temperature increase होना start होगा until it melts, जब तक वो melt नहीं होता है. So when we provide the temperature of any solid substance, generally temperature is rises until it not be convert or start to be melted, तब तक उसका temperature जो increase होता है. At the melting point, एक specific melting point पे, there is no any change into the temperature occurred through the heat supplied. When we provide the heat to the solid substance, it is converted into the melting, and while providing the heat to the melting substance, there is no any occurrence change of the temperature. So the energy which provide to the solid substance is converted in a form of melting point is generally called as a latent heat of fusion. उसको fusion में consider करते हैं. Generally ice का जो latent heat of fusion होता है वो 0.33 किलो जूल पर ग्राम का होता है, उसमें measure करते हैं. Ice का जो होता है latent heat of fusion वो कितना होता है 0.33 किलो जूल पर ग्राम के कंसिडर से किया जाता है. ठीक है. So that is generally a part of a melting point of a latent heat of fusion. उसके बाद जैसे हम देखते हैं कि मेल्टिंग पॉइंट ऑफ आइस के बारे में हम डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं कि 0.33 किलो जूल पर ग्राम होता है. तो व्हाट इज कॉल्ड मेल्टिंग पॉइंट? द टेम्परेचर एट विच solid substances start to be converted in a liquid form, that is called as a melting point. तो जिस टेम्परेचर पे सॉलिड सब्सटेंस जो होगा वो लिक्विड में कन्वर्ट होने की प्रोसेस स्टार्ट होती है, दैट प्रोसेस इज जनरली कॉल्ड एज अ मेल्टिंग पॉइंट. सो मेल्टिंग पॉइंट जो आइस का होता है वो 0 डिग्री सेल्सियस का होता है, दैट इज जनरली कॉल्ड एज अ 273.16 केल्विन. तो आइस का जो मेल्टिंग पॉइंट होता है वो 0 डिग्री सेल्सियस होता है. अगर केल्विन में कंसिडर किया जाए तो 273.16 केल्विन के आसपास होता है, पर प्रैक्टिकली हम केल्विन कितना कंसिडर करते हैं 273 केल्विन कंसिडर करते हैं. तो 0 डिग्री सेल्सियस मतलब होता है 273 केल्विन. उसके बाद वेपोराइजेशन. वेपोराइजेशन के बारे में डिस्कशन की इफ यू प्रोवाइड द हीट ऑफ लिक्विड सब्सटेंस द टेम्परेचर दैट कैन बी राइजेस एंड लिक्विड सब्सटेंस दैट शुड बी स्टार्ट टू कन्वर्टेड इनटू द गैसेस फॉर्म. So that vaporization of gases form as a part of the boiling point generally. When we start to be heated to the liquid substance, it generally converted in a form of vapor generally at a part of the boiling point. So since there is no any change of the temperature occurring at the boiling point, generally called as a latent heat of fusions of the latent heat. That is generally called as a latent heat. But what do we mean by the vaporization form? The vaporization is generally formation के liquid is start to be converted is vapor is generally called as a boiling point. Okay, when the liquid is start to be converted into a gas, that is called as a boiling point. So vaporization is what the temperature at which the liquid start to be boiling is generally called as a boiling point, and boiling point is generally 100 degree Celsius. Okay, boiling point is what 100 degree Celsius. It means 373.16 Kelvin. So when we provide the heat to the liquid substances start to be converted in a form of gases, generally called as a boiling point, or it should be also called as a vaporization, that should be converted in a form of vapor. So that is we discussing about how the effect of pressure that can be seen into the state of matter, solid, liquid and gas. Now next is very important question, that is called sublimation process. Now in the previous topic we are discussing about if we provide the heat or generally increase the temperature, solid is converted into the liquid and liquid is converted into the gas, that is called translation process. Vice versa, we can also decrease the temperature, gas convert into the liquid and liquid also convert into the gas, that is called translation process into the state of matter by increasing the temperature of a pressure or maybe heat. But what do you mean by the sublimation process? Now there are certain substances in a form of solid. There are certain substances in a form of solid, while we provide the heat to that solid substance, it is not converted into the liquid, it is directly converted into the gaseous form. Okay, So that process is called as a sublimation process. There are certain substances of a solid, while providing the heat or increase the temperature, it is not directly converted into the liquid, it converted into the gaseous form. Rather into the convert liquid, it convert directly into the gaseous form. So that process is called as a sublimation process. Now that will be also be discussing into the formation. So this type of phenomenon is called as a sublimation process. Practically if we seen that like formation of taking some practically formation की solid के substances में अगर देखते हैं तो for example some potassium permanganate substances. Potassium permanganate, it is a part of solid. It is a part of solid substance. When you provide the heat, it directly converted into the gaseous form, not in a form of liquid. So that is one process that is called sublimation process. When we provide the heat to the solid substance, it not converted into liquid, it directly converted into the gases. That is called sublimation process. So clear? After sublimation process, there is only two topics about Kelvin and Celsius that we are discussing about. What is called Kelvin and what is called Celsius. Then we are discussing about the ice, dry ice topic. Now Kelvin and Celsius, what do you mean? Kelvin generally and Celsius we use for the unit of temperature. If you want to measure the values of temperature, we use the two units that is called Kelvin and Celsius. So these are the units of temperature. If you want to measure the temperature, generally we have to use the Kelvin and Celsius. So 0 degree Celsius is generally 273 Kelvin. 0 degree Celsius is generally considered as a 273 Kelvin. So if I want to convert, for example, I have 100 degree Celsius. I have 100 degree Celsius and converted into the Kelvin. What I have to do? I have to add it 273 in it. So 100 plus 273, that becomes 373 Kelvin. So 100 degree Celsius, if you want to convert into the Kelvin, it is 373 Kelvin, because what? 100 degree Celsius plus 273, that becomes 373 Kelvin. So if you want to convert Celsius to Kelvin, you have to add it 273. But if you want to convert Kelvin to Celsius, you always have to minus 273. For example, I have 573 Kelvin. I have a value of 573 Kelvin, or converted into the Celsius, then 573 minus 273, I will get value 300 degree Celsius. So Kelvin and Celsius is what? Kelvin and Celsius both are the unit of temperature. It is generally used to measure the temperature. So if you want to convert Celsius to Kelvin or Kelvin to Celsius, you have to use the value of addition 273 Celsius to Kelvin, or Kelvin to Celsius, you have to subtract 273, then you get the proper value. Now one topic we are discussing about the dry ice. We oftenly seen in the summer seasons or maybe in a freeze, you can see that there is a dry ice available. So what do you mean by the dry ice? What is the meaning of dry ice? So dry ice is what? If a very large pressure that is passed over of carbon dioxide gas, CO2 gas. If a very large pressure that is passed out of the CO2 gases that generally converted in a formation of the colored substance whose temperature is very low. Okay. So that white color substances whose temperature is very low. So this type of substances are called as a dry ice. Generally dry ice is what? It is a part of carbon dioxide gas. So if large amount of heavily pressure that is passed on carbon dioxide gas and it converted into the white color substances whose temperature is very low. So that is generally called as a dry ice. उसको हम dry ice करते हैं. Now what is the use of dry ice? हम dry ice का क्या use करते हैं? Generally dry ice are used for the storage. Cold storage के अंदर उसका use होता है. Also used into the container where the ice cream that should be kept. तो वो उस तरह के containers के अंदर भी उसका use किया जाता है. This is called as a dry ice. So in today's class we are discussing about which topics. First we are discussing previous topic what we have discussing like solid, liquid, gas. What is its property? उसकी physical property क्या है? Particles of matters की property क्या है? Now today we are discussing about intermolecular force. कि intermolecular force क्या? The force existing between the particles. वो intermolecular force होता है जिसमें सॉलिड लिक्विड गैस के बारे में डिस्कशन किया. उसके अंदर इंटरमोलिकुलर फोर्स क्या है. उसके अलावा इफेक्ट क्या होता है प्रेशर और टेम्परेचर का स्टेट ऑफ मैटर में, जिसमें सॉलिड लिक्विड गैसेस कैसे कन्वर्ट होते हैं, फिर कैसे रिपीट होते हैं, जिसको ट्रांसलेशन प्रोसेस कहते हैं. उसके बाद हमने लेटेंट हीट ऑफ फ्यूजन क्या है, जिसमें मेल्टिंग पॉइंट, बॉइलिंग पॉइंट, वेपराइजेशन पॉइंट क्या है वो डिस्कशन किया. नेक्स्ट सब्लिमेशन प्रोसेस के बारे में समझा. उसके बाद हमने कैल्विन और सेल्सियस का डिस्कशन किया एंड देन ड्राई आइस। सो फॉर टुडेज लेक्चर आज इतना ही रखेंगे कि व्हाट इज कॉल्ड पूरा टॉपिक आपको प्रॉपरली रिवाइज करना है। जब नेक्स्ट टाइम मिलेंगे तो आगे के टॉपिक पर डिस्कशन करेंगे। तब तक के लिए बाय।